Hello everyone, thanks for joining me for another video working on the E21. So now we have the car back together. We took it to Cars and Coffee this morning and it made some weird noises on the way back when I was getting on the brakes. So we'll go ahead and inspect all four corners. We have some new in-box brake pads from, I believe, 1999. So period correct. These would have been made 9 years after this car went off the road, but I'll call it period correct. We have new rotors to put on the front, and then we'll double check everything in the rear after we've driven it since the trailing arm swap, and then we'll put new rotors, pads on the front, grease up everything, and then do a real bleed of the system. As you can see, these are pretty gross. These are the rotors and pads that were on the car when I got it. There's tons of pad life left. I'm assuming these were replaced at some point in the late 80s before this car was parked. But these rotors are pitted and gross and really not doing much good anymore. These rotors are cheap, so there's no reason not to replace them. So we'll just let that kind of lay there. It's probably not the best for it, but there's a hard line that keeps that attached, so I'm not worried about it stretching. And it's just pivoting up here on where it goes through to the soft line. So it's a hard line on this because it's not like newer BMW models and newer cars than this, where it's a soft line that runs to the caliper because you have to remove the caliper to put the brake pads in. these, similar to much newer BMWs, have these two pins that hold the pads in, and you can change the pads without removing the caliper, which is pretty cool. As you can see, I never got these very hot because they still had cobwebs and stuff on them. The brake pads themselves actually look pretty good, and if I run this number, maybe these are better pads than what I'm going to put on. They don't have any kind of weird scoring or anything, so maybe better than the cheap ones that I bought. So should just be one extremely corroded hex Allen key screw here, so I'm actually going to treat this before I try to get it off. Nice new rotor. You can tell this has been sitting for a long time in a warehouse somewhere, because there's still either a discoloration of the anti-rust coating they put on it, the corrosion inhibitor, or it actually started to rust a little bit. Either way, we'll get that off. Put that on. And this doesn't need to be tight. There's no way for it to back out once the wheel is on. You don't want to over tighten it. You want to be able to get it out later. Just use it to get the rotor centered. I don't even run these on my track car. The rotors are on and off so often that really it's just a nuisance. It slows me down. Some people will put some anti-seize here to keep the wheel from corroding to the rotor, but the same thing. I am taking this stuff apart so often, I don't see a need to do that. Those pads are so new, I don't need to push the piston back in here on the caliper either. So I'll just go ahead and slide it back over. Unhook this wear sensor. Actually, should just be able to pull it out of the pad. They may have sent me a new one with the brake pads I haven't checked yet. So we'll just pull this out. Just in case we need to reuse it. Okay, so I put this together once before. I didn't like how I did it, so I'm gonna go through this one more time and get it 100% right this time. So caliper is bolted on, and then we will put this backing plate in here, and you can see the side that has the piston pushing against it and the side that has these 4 dots that are on the back of the brake pad. And we'll take this wear sensor, and there's a solid plate on the back that's a little bit broken on this one. That slides behind the plate, or behind the back of the pad, and you can see there's a little recess inside the pad for the sticker part. So that slides in and just clicks in just like that. And then with the plate, slide this in just like that. And then this other plate, you can see the 4 dots. And you can see where people have put, looks like some kind of anti-seize or something on the back of that. And then you can see the other piston that's on this side. So put it like that, slide it in. Try to line up all these holes. Now we want to put this rattle clip in. So there's these little divots where the pins slide through and hold them down. So slide that in. And then we'll slide these pins through. So I'll put one through both sides already. That way we can press against it and not have it fly out while we put this other one in, and push this one down as hard as you can so that the pin doesn't have to be jammed up in there. But just be aware that when you're pushing down on this, you're also pushing down on the brake pad, which will misalign the hole that this is trying to go through. So get it up over the clip. And I'm actually going to start tapping on it with the hammer while pressing down to keep it lined up. What I'll do is I'll take a wrench, a little wrench. That way I can press down on the clip, but then let the pin go through the hole in the wrench. Just like that. And everything's aligned. Get both pins seated with the hammer. And then I'm actually going to put my punch on this side. I'm not going to wail on it, but I'm doing enough to make sure these pins are seated. Make sure they're flush. And that should do it. Make sure you clip everything back in. Rotor spins freely-ish. Hopefully this doesn't mean my rotor's warped before I've installed it. We'll see. So I'm gonna leave this wheel off. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then I'm gonna jack the rear of the car up. And we'll go ahead, we'll put the power bleeder on, and then we'll bleed all 4 corners, and should hopefully get much better brake feel. All right, so next I'm going to be bleeding the brakes on the E21, and I don't feel like bothering anyone to help me, so I'll use my power bleeder. And the way this works is you fill it with brake fluid and then you pressurize it. And you can buy a special adapter that will go on your master cylinder reservoir and will seal with the cap. And then this will pressurize the entire brake system. And then all you have to do is open each bleeder, let the fluid out, let the air out, close it, and it's on. And there's a pressure gauge here. You don't want it to exceed about 15, so halfway up. So you start at the caliper furthest away from the master cylinder. So on this car, master cylinder is on the front left. So then the back right is the one you want to start with. So then I'll crack this just for a second, and you'll see without the tube on, you'll see that this is pressurized without anybody up there pressing the pedal. So what we want to do is put our hose on to collect the fluid. Ideally this tube would be clear, but I just had black tube on hand today. Just crack it and then watch in the bottle for the drips. You can see just a little bit coming out, so I'll loosen this a little bit more. And the one drawback of the power bleeder is it's a little bit slower than doing it by having someone pump the pedal. But as you can see, fluid is coming out now. See a couple bubbles. Now it looks like a pretty solid stream with no bubbles. So then we'll close the bleeder off and move on to the second furthest from the master cylinder. Let's go. Make sure there's still fluid up here. Now you should see a lot more fluid come out of this a lot more quickly than the rear, because the proportioning valve will send more fluid to the fronts. You can see a nice steady stream of fluid coming out. So this is probably pretty good. And tighten that back up. And now we want to slowly release the pressure on the master cylinder here. So take a paper towel. And actually what will be a better idea is to loosen it from here, where we let the pressure out and we don't shoot brake fluid everywhere. And we'll take a turkey baster, suck the extra out. Put the cap back on. Then we'll put the wheels back on and we'll be ready to drive.